Chapter 33. The Meeting of Titans. It is not my intention, nor is it possible, no matter how interesting to me, to set down _ad seriatim _ the happenings of the next 12 hours. But a few will not be denied recital. O'Keefe regained cheerfulness. After all, Doc, he said to me, it's a beautiful scrap we're going to have. At the worst is no more than the leprechaun warned about. I would have told the tie the duh about the Banshee raid he promised me, but I was a bit taken off my feet at the time. The old girl and all the clan'll be along, said the little green man, and I bet the three will be damned glad of it, take it from me. Lachla, shining-eyed and half fearful too. I have other tidings that I am afraid will please you little, Larry darlin'. The silent ones say that you must not go into battle yourself. You must stay here with me, and with Goodwin, for if the Shining One does come, then must we be here to meet it. And you might not be, you know, Larry, if you fight, she said, looking shyly up at him from under the long lashes. The O'Keefe's jaw dropped. That's about the hardest yet, he answered slowly. Still, I see their point. The lamb corralled for the altar has no right to stray out among the lions, he added grimly. Don't worry, sweet, he told her. As long as I've sat in the game, I'll stick to the rules. Olaf took fierce joy in the coming fray. The Norns spin close to the end of this web, he rumbled. _ja. And the threads of Lugr and the Hex Woman are between their fingers for the breaking. Thor will be with me, and I have fashioned me a hammer in glory of Thor. In his hand was an enormous mace of black metal, fully 5 feet long, crowned with a massive head. I passed to the 12 hours closing. At the end of the _Coria road where the giant fernland met the edge of the cavern's ruby floor, hundreds of the _Aka were stationed in ambush, armed with their spears tipped with the rotting death and their nail-studded, metal-headed clubs. These were to attack when the Murians debauched from the _Corials. We had little hope of doing more here than effect some attrition of Yulara's hosts, for at this place the captains of the Shining One could wield the _Keth and their other uncanny weapons freely. We had learned, too, that every forge and artisan had been put to work to make an armor Marakinov had devised to withstand the natural battle equipment of the Frog people, and both Larry and I had a disquieting faith in the Russians' ingenuity. At any rate, the numbers against us would be lessened. Next, under the direction of the Frog King, levies commanded by subsidiary chieftains had completed rows of rough walls along the probable route of the Murians through the cavern. These afforded the _Aka a fair protection behind which they could hurl their darts and spears. Curiously enough, they had never developed the bow as a weapon. At the opening of the cavern, a strong barricade stretched almost to the 2 ends of the crescent strand. Almost, I say, because there had not been time to build it entirely across the mouth. And from edge to edge of the Titanic bridge, from where it sprang outward at the shore of the Crimson Sea to 100 feet away from the golden door of the abode, barrier after barrier was piled. Behind the wall defending the mouth of the cavern, waited other thousands of the _Aka. At each end of the unfinished barricade they were mustered thickly, and at right and left of the crescent where their forest began, more legions were assembled to make way up to the ledge as opportunity offered. Rank upon rank they manned the bridge barriers. They swarmed over the pinnacles and in the hollows of the island's ragged outer lip. The domed castle was a hive of them, if I may mix my metaphors, and the rocks and gardens that surrounded the abode glittered with them. Now, said the handmaiden, there's nothing else we can do save wait. She led us out through her bower and up the little path that ran to the embrasure. Through the quiet came a sound, a sighing, a half-mournful whispering that beat about us and fled away. They come, cried Lachla, the light of battle in her eyes. Larry drew her to him, raised her in his arms, kissed her. A woman, acclaimed the O'Keefe. A real woman in mine. With the cry of the portal, there was movement among the _Aka, the glint of moving spears, flash of metal-tipped clubs, rattle of horny spurs, rumblings of battle cries. And we waited, it seemed interminably, gaze fastened upon the low wall across the cavern mouth. Suddenly, I remembered the crystal through which I had peered when the hidden assassins had crept upon us. Mentioning it to Lachla, she gave a little cry of vexation, a command to her attendant. and not long that faithful if unusual lady had returned with a tray of the glasses. Raising mine, I saw the lines furthest away leap into sudden activity. Spurred warrior after warrior leaped upon the barricade and over it. Flashes of intense, green light, mingled with gleams like lightning strokes of concentrated moon rays, sprang from behind the wall, sprang and struck and burned upon the scales of the Batrachians. "They come," whispered Lachla. At the far ends of the crescent, a terrific milling had begun. Here it was plain the Aka were holding. Faintly, for the distance was great, I could see fresh force upon force rush up and take the places of those who had fallen. Over each of these ends, and along the whole line of the barricade, a mist of dancing, diamond atoms began to rise, sparking, coruscating points of diamond dust that darted and danced. What had once been Lachla's guardians dancing now in the nothingness? God, but it's hard to stay here like this, groaned the O'Keefe. Olaf's teeth were bared, the lips drawn back in such a fighting grin as his ancestors berserk on their raven ships must have borne. Raider was livid with rage, the handmaiden's nostrils flaring wide, all her wrathful soul in her eyes. Suddenly, while we looked, the rocky wall which the Aka had built at the cavern mouth was not. It vanished, as though an unseen, unbelievably gigantic hand had with the lightning's speed swept it away. And with it vanished, too, long lines of the great amphibians close behind it. Then down upon the ledge, dropping into the crimson sea, sending up geysers of ruby spray, dashing on the bridge, crushing the frogmen, fell a shower of stone, mingled with distorted shapes and fragments whose scales still flashed meteoric as they hurled from above. "That which makes things fall upward," hissed Olaf. "That which I saw in the garden of Luger." The fiendish agency of destruction which Marakinov had revealed to Larry. The force that cut off gravitation and sent all things within its range racing outward into space. And now over the debris upon the ledge, striking with long sword and daggers, here and there a captain flashing the green ray. Moving on in ordered squares, came the soldiers of the Shining One. Nearer and nearer the verge of the ledge they pushed Nax's warriors, leaping upon the dwarfs, smiting them with spear and club, with teeth and spur. The Aka fought like devils. Quivering under the ray, they leaped and dragged down and slew. Now there was but one long line of the frogmen at the very edge of the cliff, and ever the clouds of dancing, diamond atoms grew thicker over them all. That last thin line of the Aka was going. Yet they fought to the last, and none toppled over the lip without at least one of the armored Murians in his arms. My gaze dropped to the foot of the cliffs. Stretched along their length was a wide ribbon of beauty, a shimmering multitude of gleaming, pulsing, prismatic moons, glowing ever brighter, ever more wondrous, the gigantic Medusi globes feasting on dwarf and frogman alike. Across the waters, faintly, came a triumphant shouting from Luger's and Yulara's men. Was the ruddy light of the place lessening, growing paler, changing to a faint rose? There was an exclamation from Larry. Something like hope relaxed the drawn muscles of his face. He pointed to the aureate dome wherein sat the three, and then I saw, out of it, through the long transverse slit through which the Silent Ones kept their watch on cavern, bridge, and abyss, a torrent of the opalescent light was pouring. It cascaded like a waterfall, and as it flowed it spread whirling out, in columns and eddies, clouds and wisps of misty, curdled coruscations. It hung like a veil over all the islands, filtering everywhere, driving back the crimson light as though possessed of impenetrable substance, and still it cast not the faintest shadowing upon our vision. "Good God," breathed Larry. "Look!" The radiance was marching down the colossal bridge. It moved swiftly, in some unthinkable way intelligently. It swathed the Aka, and closer, ever closer it swept toward the approach upon which Yulara's men had now gained foothold. From their ranks came flash after flash of the green ray aimed at the abode. But as the light sped and struck the opalescence, it was blotted out. The shimmering mist seemed to enfold, to dissipate it. Lachla drew a deep breath. "The Silent Ones forgive me for doubting them," she whispered. And again hope blossomed on her face, even as it did on Larry's. The frogmen were gaining. Clothed in the armor of that mist, they pressed back from the bridgehead the invaders. There was another prodigious movement at the ends of the crescent, and racing up, pressing against the dwarfs, came other legions of Naxx warriors. And reinforcing those out on the prodigious arch, the frogmen stationed in the gardens below us poured back to the castle and out through the open portal. "They're licked," shouted Larry. "There." So quickly I could not follow the movement. His automatic leap to his hand spoke, once and again and again. Raider leaped to the head of the little path, sword in hand. Olaf, shouting and whirling his mace, followed. I strove to get my own gun quickly. For up that path were running 20 of Lugger's men, while from below Lugger's own voice roared. "Quick! Slay not the handmaiden or her lover. Carry them down. Quick! But slay the others." The handmaiden raced toward Larry, stopped, whistled shrilly again and again. Larry's pistol was empty, but as the dwarfs rushed upon him, I dropped 2 of them with mine. It jammed. I could not use it. I sprang to his side. Raider was down, struggling in a heap of Lugger's men. Olaf, a Viking of old, was whirling his great hammer and striking through armor, flesh, and bone. Larry was down. Lokla flew to him. But the Norseman, now streaming blood from a dozen wounds, caught a glimpse of her coming, turned, thrust out a mighty hand, sent her reeling back, and then with his hammer cracked the skulls of those trying to drag the O'Keefe down the path. A cry from Lokla. The dwarfs had seized her, had lifted her despite her struggles, were carrying her away. One I dropped with the butt of my useless pistol, and then went down myself under the rush of another. Through the clamor, I heard a booming of the aka_, closer, closer, then through it the bellow of Lugger. I made a mighty effort, swung a hand up, and sunk my fingers in the throat of the soldier striving to kill me. Writhing over him, my fingers touched a poniard. I thrust it deep, staggered to my feet. The O'Keefe, shielding Lokla, was battling with a long sword against a half-dozen of the soldiers. I started toward him, was struck, and under the impact hurled to the ground. Dizzily I raised myself and leaning upon my elbow, stared and moved no more. For the dwarfs lay dead, and Larry, holding Lokla tightly, was staring even as I, and ranged at the head of the path were the aka_, whose booming advance in obedience to the handmaiden's call I had heard. And at what we all stared was Olaf, crimson with his wounds, and Lugger, in blood-red armor, locked in each other's grip, struggling, smiting, tearing, kicking, and swaying about the little space before the embrasure. I crawled over toward the O'Keefe. He raised his pistol, dropped it. "Can't hit him without hitting Olaf," he whispered. Lokla signaled the frogmen. They advanced toward the 2, but Olaf saw them, broke the red dwarf's hold, sent Lugger reeling a dozen feet away. "No," shouted the Norseman, the ice of his pale blue eyes glinting like frozen flames, blood streaming down his face and dripping from his hands. "No, Lugger is mine. None but me slays him. Ho, you Lugger!" And cursed him and Ulara and the dweller hideously. I cannot set those curses down here. They spurred Lugger. Mad now as the Norseman, the red dwarf sprang. Olaf struck a blow that would have killed an ordinary man, but Lugger only grunted, swept in, and seized him about the waist. One mighty arm began to creep up toward Huldriksson's throat. "Where, Olaf?" cried O'Keefe, but Olaf did not answer. He waited until the red dwarf's hand was close to his shoulder, and then, with an incredibly rapid movement, once before had I seen something like it in a wrestling match between Papuans, he had twisted Lugger around, twisted him so that Olaf's right arm lay across the tremendous breast, the left behind the neck, and Olaf's left leg held the voice's armored thighs vice-like against his right knee, while over that knee lay the small of the red dwarf's back. For a second or two the Norseman looked down upon his enemy, motionless in that paralyzing grip, and then slowly he began to break him. Lokla gave a little cry, made a motion toward the 2, but Larry drew her head down against his breast, hiding her eyes, then fastened his own upon the pair, white-faced, stern. Slowly, ever so slowly, proceeded Olaf. Twice Lugger moaned. At the end he screamed horribly. There was a cracking sound, as of a stout stick snapped. Huldrickson stooped, silently. He picked up the limp body of the voice, not yet dead, for the eyes rolled, the lips strove to speak, lifted it, walked to the parapet, swung it twice over his head, and cast it down to the red waters.